my lessons in softness did not come easy. If I reflect back on the type of person that I was when I discovered yoga and then through those early years of practicing yoga, I didn't have a connection between my life off the mat and my life on the mat. The story that I picked to share with you guys tonight is after I graduated from Cal Poly here in San Luis Obispo, I went overseas for 10 years. Most of that time was in New Zealand. And as I was approaching the end of my time there and had decided to go to India to study with the teacher, my teacher, I needed to kind of take what things I had in New Zealand back home to Fresno, California, where my parents lived. And plus I, hadn't really spent a whole lot of time in Fresno for the last 8 years. And it was just a time to reconnect in a way with my parents. And we had a couple days together, and then it was time to go to the airport, and we're at curbside Fresno International Airport. If you've ever been there, International is a bit of a stretch. And I'm taking my backpack out of the trunk, and my mom gets out of the car and she's crying. And I went up to her and I said, "Mom, what's wrong?" And she wouldn't look at me, and she was sobbing. And I said, "Really, Mom, what's happening here? Tell me." The tears are just streaming down her face, and she goes, "You're gonna die!" I tried to assure her, "Mom, I'm healthy, I'm fine, I've taken my shots, I don't even like vaccines, I took them, I'm not going to drink any water when I'm there, I'm going to be fine." Fast forward about 15 years, and you want to know something? She was right. Something did die in India. That person that I was before I went to India died. That kind of hard driving, hard working, have a plan for everything and a plan B and a plan C. Driving. That part of me died there. And I began to wake up to this epiphany in a way that if we show up to that resistance or hardness in our lives with that equal hardness to kind of muscle or grind or grip our way through this, that we're working against ourselves. So I'm working against myself. And it's that light bulb went off for me where softness and intimacy is met with an equal softness and intimacy. And can we use softness in a way in this hard world to make space between people, between ourselves, the hard spots in ourselves? And that aha moment made me realize that these lessons on my mat are so appropriate and valuable and powerful in the relationships that we have with our children, with our parents, with our partners, and to the point now where it's essentially inseparable. The physical work that I do on a yoga mat has a psychological component that is inseparable. And as I'm going about life, when I meet resistance or difficulty or stressful situations, I know sometimes I need a reminder, and that's why Tawny's come into my life. But I know that the hard route doesn't work, that it's meeting that tender part in relationship as softly as you can is what builds power, strength between two individuals. And it works exactly the same on the yoga mat. So that epiphany for me was in a way short-lived when I got back from India that first time, because I found myself coming to San Luis Obispo, opening up a yoga studio, starting a yoga mat business named MANDUKA that was just on this, trajectory to success, almost in spite of myself. But it was very stressful in those days, and I kind of forgot some of these things that I learned in India. And it took a health condition, a diagnosis after a routine physical, that kind of made me wake up and realize that I was out of balance. I wasn't living what I was teaching. And after a suggestion from a friend, I went back to India, to a treatment center, Ayurvedic hospital, to be exactly what it was. And while at this hospital for 10 weeks, I met someone, a teacher, and probably a 75-year-old man who didn't speak a word of English. His students were all teenage and younger boys, school boys, who spoke perfect English, so they would help me translate when things I didn't understand by visually seeing what was happening. But I could tell just from what I was seeing and the joy and lightheartedness that was coming energetically from this teacher to all these boys, I could see that this type of yoga was not what I had learned in 15 years of doing Iyengar yoga. That there was something profoundly different. And as I started to understand more and more, it reminded me of the first trip to India and how it is so important to not only have this softness, but also to have a sense of joy and lightheartedness. And those of you that come to my classes, most of you I've kind of trained when to laugh at my jokes. and usually if you don't laugh, I let it sit in that awkward silence, and then I kind of share that, my humor takes a certain degree of sophistication for the listener to fully appreciate. And bad humor, I find, is almost, if not more effective than good humor. And I know about half this room, I can see the nodding of the heads, that I really am a master of bad humor. Right? Yeah. So, I wanna share with you something that maybe you can take home with you, because I know there's about half the room here that aren't students of mine. But how does softness show up in a body? And one of the simplest poses that I know, and I'm going to take my shoes off here because I want to feel the floor. I got my favorite socks on that my daughter gave me. So one of the simplest poses to do standing in yoga is called mountain pose. And in this kind of hard world that we live in, and this heaviness that we grow up thinking gravity is kind of grinding us into the earth, without the understanding of what gravity is actually trying to do for us. And ultimately, gravity is about connection, right? We're on this mud ball going through space at 220,000 kilometers a second. It's like this crazy speed. And we're grounded physically because of this force of gravity. And then there's also this psychological energy that gravity provides, this grounding psychologically. Like we feel when we're out in nature walking barefoot, we feel this psychological homeness, like I'm home. And that feeling of home on this planet creates this psychological grounding. People that aren't grounded tend to be, scattered. People that are grounded seem to have this inherent joy and stability. And this pose in particular, if I look back at the way I approached it when I was first learning, it was very specific. It was lifting the chest to open the heart, pulling the shoulder blades back to help supposedly lift the rib cage and open it more, and to pull the abdomen in a little bit and the tailbone down a little bit. And this is only about half of what it was cued. And just for effect, I'm demonstrating this pose. And you can imagine if you're going for, let's say, the psychological equivalent of an open heart, imagine with this posture trying to share an open heart with someone. I think it would be difficult. I know from experience in some of my earlier relationships that it was not getting what I was hoping it was going to get. Now, to transform this common shape in yoga, the first thing that I cue is to soften the top of the lungs. And when you consciously soften the top of the lungs, the energy of your heart falls a little bit. If you watch me, as I soften through the chest, what I'm feeling is that the weight in my feet increases. That's this beautiful force that gravity provides us to ground us. And that response at the level of my feet is one of lightness. And I allow that subtle sensation of lightness to move up, mostly through the back of my body. And as the intuitive part of myself has learned to anticipate that feeling of lightness, I just create a little bit of movement with my chin in, so that as I draw my chin in, the back of the skull moves up a little bit. And I create an extension with a quiet chest that is maintaining the natural curves of our spine, which is where the integrity of the spine resides. And this simple pose now becomes one of a balancing pose. It's not so much about opening the heart or opening the chest. It's about learning how to balance the physical and psychological forces in our body in this simple shape. Now, in all yoga, there's challenges once you master a certain pose, like in life, to challenge yourself. And the tree pose is kind of the next pose. And for those of you new to yoga, I teach beginners to start in tree like this, like you'd be standing waiting for something at the ice cream bar, right? And this challenges my balance a little bit, especially as I'm talking and balancing at the same time. You can see my feet wobbling a little bit. But I'm not too concerned about that because I trust that the intuitive quality that moves in my body will also adjust the musculature of my legs, my pelvis, and my upper body to keep from falling. If you want to challenge more, you just put your foot on the inside. And now there's almost all the weight on this leg. And you can see how this works. With each step, the degree of challenge becomes more. If I try to muscle my way into this pose, it gets even more unstable. If I soften and let my inner energy sink down, it calms my energy, it grounds me, and it gives me that lightness where I can balance and then move the foot up a little higher. All right? So this is how this works. And I encourage all of you that don't practice yoga, and if you're buying a book tonight, to really allow yourself this permission, in a way, to read this book like an exciting novel in a way. Parts of the book are quite inspiring, just without even mentioning the word yoga, on how we meet ourselves in difficult situations.